The roar of the crowd echoed in Jack's ears as he stood at the edge of the glowing arena, his body alive with tension. The lights flashed so brightly they nearly blinded him, but Jack didn't flinch. He never did. He was used to it, used to the heat, the pressure, the endless thirst for violence that came with being a nano-warrior. A hero in the eyes of the world, a pawn in the eyes of those who controlled him. Tonight, like every other night, was all about the fight. The fight. It didn't matter that the arena was nothing more than a circus for the masses, a brutal spectacle where blood was shed and lives were lost in the name of entertainment. Jack didn't care about the politics, didn't care about the corporations pulling the strings. He wasn't in it for a cause. He was in it for the fame, for the thrill, for the rush of feeling invincible. He cracked his neck as he glanced around, smirking to himself. Showtime, he muttered under his breath. Across from him, his opponent was a mountain of a man. A tank of a soldier, his face was a mask of rage, his muscles bulging beneath his tight combat suit. The man was armed with a glowing, serrated blade, a weapon that would make most soldiers flinch. But not Jack. No, Jack had his nanobots. A surge of confidence washed over him as he activated his neural interface. His body hummed with energy as the nanobots coursed through his bloodstream, augmenting his reflexes and muscle memory to superhuman levels. The crowd roared, as if they could feel the charge in the air. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena, smooth and almost too rehearsed. In the blue corner, the reigning champion, Jack the Wraith Devlin. And in the red corner, a new contender looking to prove himself, the Titan. The crowd went wild. Jack raised his hand, giving them a little wave. It was all part of the act, of course. The crowds loved him, loved his cocky attitude, his taunting smile. He was the good guy, the one who always found a way to win, even when the odds were stacked against him. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know what he really was. The bell rang. The Titan charged, and Jack was already moving before the sound had fully faded. His legs burned with the familiar intensity as his enhanced reflexes kicked in. He dodged the Titan's first swing effortlessly, the blade whistling past his face. The crowd gasped. "Missed me, big guy," Jack teased, his voice a mix of bravado and amusement, but there was something different this time, something that gnawed at him beneath the surface. Jack had never been afraid of pain, of death, or of failure. But as his opponent circled him, he felt unsettled. The nanobots were supposed to make him perfect, unstoppable. They enhanced his every move, gave him strength beyond human limits, but today something felt off. His movements weren't as fluid as they should be. The hum in his head, the buzz of the neural interface, was slightly out of sync. As Titan lunged at him again, Jack dodged, but barely. He stumbled backward, his foot slipping on the slick arena floor. The audience murmured, unsure of what they were seeing. That's when it happened. A flash of light, a brief surge of energy, and then Jack's body moved without his command. His limbs jerked forward, the nanobots taking over, overriding his own instincts. In an instant, he was on the Titan. His arm shot out, grabbing the man by the throat and lifting him off the ground like he was a ragdoll. The crowd went silent, watching in stunned disbelief. Jack's mind screamed, trying to regain control, but the nanobots were in full control now, and they had their own agenda. With a sickening crack, Jack twisted the Titan's neck, dropping him to the floor. The arena was silent for a heartbeat. Then the crowd erupted in applause. "Jack Devlin, the Wraith, remains undefeated," the announcer shouted, as if nothing had happened. Jack stood there, breathing heavily, looking down at the body of his opponent. His mind was racing, but his body was still shaking with adrenaline. This wasn't right. Something had gone wrong. He hadn't wanted to kill the Titan like that, not like this. He had never lost control before, but now, standing over the broken body, he couldn't deny it. The aftermath was all too familiar. Jack was back in his locker room, the familiar buzz of the nanobots in his bloodstream making him feel like he was on fire. He stripped off his gear, wiping the sweat from his face, trying to shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. "Good work out there, champ." A voice from the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Jack looked up. It was Milo, one of the techs assigned to the arena. Milo was an unassuming guy, with thick glasses and a nervous energy that was always present when he spoke. But Milo's words weren't just casual. There was something in his eyes, something that made Jack pause. "You okay?" Milo asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Jack scoffed, shrugging it off. "I'm fine. Just the usual, right?" But Milo didn't seem convinced. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Jack. I've been seeing some weird readings. Your nanobots, they're acting strange. It's not just your performance, there's something else going on." Jack frowned. Weird readings? That didn't sound good. But he wasn't about to let Milo see him sweat. "I'm sure it's nothing," Jack said, trying to dismiss it with a wave. "I've been through worse. Just another glitch in the system." Milo didn't leave, though. He stood there, shifting nervously. "I'm telling you, it's more than that. You've been getting erratic signals. Messages you didn't send. There's something going on behind the scenes, Jack. Something bigger." Jack stopped what he was doing, suddenly more interested. "What are you talking about?" Before Milo could answer, there was a knock on the door. A tall, imposing figure stepped in, Serena, the arena's head manager, a woman who seemed to know everything about everyone. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, but she flashed a practiced smile when she saw Jack. "Time to go, Mr. Devlin," she said smoothly. "Your next match is scheduled for tomorrow. We need you in top form." Jack nodded, but something about her tone made him uneasy. She knew. She always knew. And her presence had the unsettling effect of making everything feel like it was under control, even if it wasn't. As Jack headed out, he couldn't shake the feeling that Milo's warning wasn't just paranoia. Something was wrong. And he was about to find out just how wrong it all was. The next day, as he entered the arena for his next match, the usual excitement was dampened by a deep, gnawing unease in the pit of his stomach. The crowd was roaring, but it felt hollow, like it was all a setup, a show. The blinding lights, the booming speakers, the endless screams, it all felt like a dream he couldn't wake up from. But the moment he locked eyes with his opponent, his heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just any fighter. This wasn't someone who had signed up to entertain the masses. This was Sarah, the woman from his past, the one who had warned him, the one who seemed to know things he didn't understand. She was standing across the ring, her face emotionless, her eyes cold, but there was a fire in her gaze that unsettled Jack more than anything else. That he knew, right then, that his entire world was about to come crashing down. The air in the arena crackled with static, the anticipation palpable as the crowd roared in excitement. Jack stood frozen for a moment, his gaze locked onto the woman across from him, Sarah. She was the last person he expected to see here, and the look in her eyes sent a chill down his spine. There was no mistaking it. Sarah wasn't here to fight for fame, for glory, or even for the money. She was here for something else. "Ready to play, soldier," the announcer's voice boomed, as if trying to break the tension, but it only made the moment feel more surreal. Sarah didn't answer. She simply lifted her fists, and in that simple gesture, Jack knew. This wasn't going to be a fight like the others. This was something different. Something bigger. And it made his heart race with more than just adrenaline. The bell rang, and for a moment, the world slowed down. Jack's instincts kicked in. The nanobots hummed inside him, gearing up for combat. He could feel his body heightening, becoming sharper, faster. He was a weapon, and he had the skill to make Sarah's death look effortless. At least, that's what he told himself. But as he lunged forward, Sarah was already there, moving with precision that was almost too fast to track. She sidestepped his punch effortlessly and countered with a brutal elbow to his ribs. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, but Jack barely flinched. He swung again, this time faster, but Sarah was already gone, slipping away from his reach like she knew his every move before he did. This wasn't a battle, it was a dance. A test. And Jack realized, with a sinking feeling, that he was the one being tested. His mind raced, trying to figure out why Sarah was here, why she was holding back, why she was so perfect. Every move, every counter, every feint was calculated, deliberate. She wasn't fighting to win, she was fighting to expose his weaknesses. They clashed again, this time Jack's fist meeting her forearm with a sharp crack. She grinned at him, a brief flicker of something, satisfaction, recognition, maybe amusement. Her eyes bored into his, and for a moment, Jack felt a flash of something deep inside him, a fragment of memory, a flicker of truth. She knows who I am. Come on, Jack, Sarah said, her voice calm but cutting through the noise of the crowd. You don't really think you're winning, do you? His heart skipped a beat. Winning? He was the best, the champion, the top contender. He had beaten dozens of men, countless soldiers. He was the wraith. But as Sarah moved, evading him with effortless grace, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not in control anymore. Not of the fight. Not of his own body. A surge of panic hit him, but he quickly shoved it down. He wasn't going to lose. Not now. Not to her. Jack gritted his teeth, launching himself at her again, his body propelled by the nanobots running through his bloodstream. He felt them inside him, urging him on, pushing him beyond human limits, beyond what he was capable of alone. But then it happened again, the feeling of detachment, that sense of being more than human, of being controlled. The nanobots were no longer just enhancing him. They were dictating his actions. And that was the moment he realized something was terribly wrong. Sarah saw it too. Her eyes narrowed as she took a step back, sizing him up. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, she closed the distance between them. Before Jack could react, she slammed an elbow into his chest, sending him stumbling backward. His vision blurred for a split second, and for the briefest moment, he thought he saw something. A flash. A memory. It was gone too quickly for him to grasp, but he felt it. The echoes of something deeper, buried beneath the surface. Do you even remember who you are, Jack? Sarah's voice cut through the chaos, like a blade to his mind. His pulse quickened. He tried to focus, tried to push her words away, but they lingered, gnawing at him. Shut up, he spat, his voice hoarse. You're not going to win. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were hollow. The fight wasn't about winning anymore. It was about something else. Something he didn't fully understand. Sarah knew something about him, about this experiment, that he didn't. Sarah's eyes softened for a moment, but there was no pity in them. I don't want to fight you, Jack. But I'm going to make you see. I'm going to make you understand. Before Jack could respond, the world seemed to shift. There was a crackling noise in his head, like static, a buzzing that overwhelmed everything else. He stumbled, his legs giving way beneath him, and fell to his knees. His vision swam, his mind spiraling. The nanobots inside him were misfiring, conflicting, like they were scrambling for control. Sarah's voice broke through the noise. They've been using you, Jack. All this time. You're not just a fighter, not just a champion. You're a weapon. A prototype. Jack's hands trembled, and for the first time in a long while, fear crept into his chest. He felt different. He felt like he was being torn apart from the inside. No, his voice cracked. No, that's not possible. I'm the Wraith. I choose this. I choose my fights. You think you're choosing anything? Sarah's voice was gentle, but there was a cold edge to it now. You were never in control. The nanobots, Jack, they've been messing with your head. They've been controlling you, shaping you into what they need you to be. The words hung in the air like a weight, and for the first time, Jack's conviction wavered. The truth, however awful, was starting to take root. The unease he'd felt earlier, those strange signals, the glitches in his own movements, they weren't random. You were a test subject, Sarah continued, her gaze unwavering. A weapon, like the rest of us. But you're different now. You're too far gone. The nanobots have done something to you, something they didn't plan for. Jack's chest tightened, and he felt his breath catch. Test subject? A weapon? His mind screamed in denial, but deep down, he knew. He had been a part of something far darker than he ever imagined. The arena seemed to fade away. The lights dimmed, the noise of the crowd muted. Everything became still, like he was trapped in a moment outside of time. He had always thought that the nanobots were a tool, something that made him better, stronger. But now he understood. They were more than that. They were control. You weren't just enhanced, Jack, Sarah said, her voice cutting through the chaos inside his head. You were programmed. And it's not just your body they control. It's your mind. They've been using you all this time. Making you fight, making you win, making you believe in the game. Shut up, Jack muttered, fighting the panic rising in his chest. I'm not some puppet. I'm the Wraith. I make my own decisions. Sarah shook her head, her expression filled with a sadness Jack couldn't quite place. You were a prototype, Jack. The first test. And now they're going to use you again. They want to make an army. And you're just the beginning. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. The implications were too much. The arena, the games, it was all part of something bigger. Something that didn't just involve him. It involved everyone. Sarah stepped forward, her eyes fierce now. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can still break free. You can stop them. Jack's vision blurred, his thoughts swirling like a storm. He had always prided himself on being in control. But now, with the truth unraveling in front of him, he wasn't so sure anymore. His body felt heavy, like 1,000 pounds of lead pressing down on him. The nanobots were in overdrive, scrambling, their signals getting louder, more insistent. He could feel them inside him, trying to drown out the truth, to keep him in line, but for the first time, Jack fought back. He pushed through the haze, through the buzzing in his brain, and found the one thing that had always been his own, his will. His choice. I'm not your puppet, he whispered, his voice hoarse but firm. I'm Jack Devlin. And I'm not going to play your game anymore. With everything he had left, Jack pushed himself to his feet, eyes locked on Sarah's. You're right, he said, determination flooding through him. This ends now. The crowd's roars echoed hollowly in Jack's ears as he locked eyes with Sarah. The noise of the arena, the flashing lights, the sense of spectacle, it all seemed distant, as if he were submerged underwater, the world pressing down on him from all sides. His body was trembling with more than just the adrenaline of the fight. It was a deep, raw tremor, the aftermath of a revelation he couldn't ignore. He had always thought he was in control. He had thought the nanobots were just a tool, an enhancement, something that made him the best. But now, everything felt different. His thoughts weren't entirely his own. His body wasn't entirely his own. You're a tool, Jack, Sarah said quietly, her voice cutting through his swirling thoughts. And you've been nothing but a weapon for them. But you can change. You can make this stop. He wanted to deny it. He wanted to fight back, to prove her wrong, but deep inside, he knew. She was right. The truth had been there all along, buried beneath layers of lies, of manipulation, of control. He had never truly been free, but he could be. He could choose. The nanobots in his bloodstream surged again, but this time Jack didn't fight them. He didn't try to push them down, to suppress their power. Instead, he let them flow, let them flood through him. It felt wrong, like trying to force his own body to betray him, but at the same time, it felt right. He reached into the neural interface that connected him to the nanobots and, for the first time, he truly tried to control them. The hum inside his head turned into a roar, and the world shifted around him. The nanobots rebelled at first, as if they were fighting him, trying to maintain their hold. But Jack's will was stronger than their programming. He didn't just want to fight anymore. He wanted to break free. It wasn't a decision, it was an act of defiance. Sarah watched him with a mixture of awe and caution. She knew what was happening. She had seen it before. "Jack," she began, but Jack raised a hand to silence her. His eyes were locked onto hers, and for the first time in their long, complicated history, there was understanding between them. "I'm not your weapon," Jack said, his voice a low growl, as if the words were being dragged out of him against his will. "I'm not anyone's weapon. Not anymore." The nanobots surged within him, a tide of raw, untapped power, and Jack felt himself coming alive. His muscles strained, the energy vibrating through his bones, but now, it wasn't just physical. His mind felt clearer, sharper, and for the first time in a long time, free. With a sudden burst of speed, Jack moved toward Sarah, but this time, it wasn't to fight. It wasn't to destroy. It was to understand. He needed to know why. Why she had come for him. Why she had shown him the truth. Before he could reach her, the arena's lights flickered violently. The ground beneath his feet trembled, and a loud, mechanical hum filled the air. Something was happening. Something he wasn't ready for. Sarah's face darkened as she stepped back. "They're here." Jack's heart dropped. He had suspected it, but hearing it out loud was something else entirely. "They?" Jack asked, his voice tense. "They," Sarah repeated, her eyes scanning the edges of the arena. "The ones pulling the strings. The ones who've been watching you. They'll never let you go. Not without a fight." Jack's pulse raced as he turned toward the shadows at the far end of the arena. Figures began to emerge, moving with mechanical precision. They were soldiers, or something like them, armored, masked, and completely inhuman in their movements. The nanobots inside Jack reacted, the interface flaring to life, and he could feel his body preparing for combat, instinctively shifting into a stance. But this time, it was different. This time, he was in control. "Are you ready?" Sarah's voice was steady, but there was a hint of urgency in her tone. "You've been waiting for this, Jack. This is your chance. This is your moment to take back what's yours." Jack swallowed hard. The arena, the nanobots, the battles, it all had led him here. To this moment. To this choice. He looked at Sarah one last time, a silent promise passing between them. She didn't need to say more. She had already given him the truth. And now, it was his turn to act on it. With a battle cry, Jack surged forward, his enhanced strength propelling him faster than he had ever moved before. The soldiers were closing in, but Jack wasn't going to let them take him back to the cage, back to being a puppet. He wasn't anyone's experiment anymore. The first soldier lunged at him with a blade raised high, but Jack sidestepped, using the soldier's momentum to slam his elbow into the man's chest. The sound of cracking armor filled the air, and the soldier crumpled to the ground. But Jack barely paused. His body moved instinctively, the nanobots flowing through him, guiding his actions. As he faced the next threat, the second soldier came at him with a gun, firing in rapid succession. Jack moved with blinding speed, his hand snatching the barrel of the weapon before it could fire again. He twisted, disarming the soldier in one fluid motion, and then slammed the man into the ground with enough force to crack the concrete beneath him. "More," Jack muttered under his breath. The arena was alive with the sounds of combat now, soldiers swarming the ring, but Jack was in the zone, faster, stronger, more powerful than he had ever been. The nanobots inside him were working overtime, but this time, he wasn't a slave to them. He was their master. He was free. Sarah moved beside him, her own enhanced abilities coming to the fore as she took down soldiers with precision and grace. She wasn't just fighting to survive. She was fighting for something bigger, for the future, for the possibility of a life where people like them weren't just tools to be used, discarded, and forgotten. Together, they cut through the soldiers, moving like a pair of predators in the night. Jack's mind raced as he fought, but now it was all clear. The truth was out. The game was over. The nano arena was nothing but a prison, and he was done playing. The last soldier fell at his feet, and Jack stood amidst the chaos, breathing heavily. His body was covered in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest, but there was a strange sense of peace that washed over him. He had done it. He had taken control. Sarah stood beside him, her face flushed from the fight. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something close to respect. "You did it, Jack," she said softly. Jack looked around the battlefield, his mind racing as he processed everything. The arena was silent now, the soldiers defeated, their threat neutralized. But the real battle was still to come. There was more to the world than just the arena. More to the conspiracy that had manipulated him and so many others. And he wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. "I'm not done," Jack said, his voice firm. "Not by a long shot." Sarah nodded, understanding. "We can take them down, Jack. Together. But we'll need to move fast. They'll be coming for us." "I know," Jack replied. "But this time, we'll be ready." And as they made their way out of the arena, the world beyond waiting, Jack felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. It was a feeling that didn't come easily for someone like him, someone who had been shaped and molded by others. But now, with the weight of the truth in his hands, Jack was ready to fight for something worth living for. For freedom, for control, and for the future that was still waiting to be written.